The sun beat down on the cracked earth of Harmony Gulch, baking the small, struggling farm. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow with a calloused hand, her gaze sweeping over the parched fields of corn. It was a constant battle against the elements, a fight she waged daily for her two children, 8-year-old Billy and 6-year-old Lily. Their father, Thomas, had been gone for 2 years, lost to a fever that swept through the town, leaving Sarah a widow and the sole provider. She was a woman forged in hardship. Her hands, though roughened by labor, were gentle as she braided Lily's hair each morning. Her eyes, though shadowed by worry, sparkled with fierce determination when she looked at her children. She taught Billy to mend fences and Lily to tend the small vegetable garden, instilling in them the same resilience that burned within her. Their farmhouse, a simple structure of wood and stone, stood as a testament to their hard work. Inside, it was filled with the warmth of their love, despite the constant threat of poverty and the dangers of the Wild West. Sarah told them stories of brave pioneers and strong women, hoping to inspire them to face whatever challenges lay ahead. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Billy ran into the house, his face pale. "Mama," he whispered, "I saw riders, a lot of them, heading this way." Sarah's heart clenched. Raiders. They were the scourge of the territory, preying on vulnerable farms and towns. She knew the stories, tales of stolen supplies, brutal violence, and lives shattered in an instant. A wave of protectiveness washed over her, a primal instinct to shield her children from harm. She pulled them close, her voice trembling slightly as she said, "We'll be all right. We'll hide." But deep down, Sarah knew hiding wouldn't be enough. These weren't petty thieves. These were the notorious Jake and his gang, known for their ruthlessness and their insatiable greed. They would search every corner of the farm, and they wouldn't hesitate to use force to get what they wanted. Sarah had heard whispers of Jake himself, a man with a silver tongue and a heart of stone, a man who could charm the birds from the trees and then crush them in his hand. She hugged her children tighter, her mind racing, desperately searching for a way to protect them from the storm that was about to break. The riders appeared on the horizon like dark specks, growing larger with each passing moment. Sarah ushered Billy and Lily into the root cellar beneath the farmhouse, a small, damp space usually reserved for storing vegetables. "Stay here," she instructed, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Don't make a sound. I'll come for you when they're gone." She closed the heavy wooden door, plunging them into near darkness. Lily began to cry softly, but Billy, ever the brave one, put his arm around her. Sarah offered a silent prayer, hoping they would be safe in their hiding place. Emerging from the farmhouse, Sarah stood tall, her chin lifted in defiance. She knew she couldn't outrun them, as she wouldn't cower in fear. She would face them head-on, buying time for her children. The riders thundered into the yard, a dozen men on horseback, their faces grim and hardened by the sun and wind. Dust swirled around them, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. In the lead was a man who could only be Jake. He was younger than Sarah had imagined, with dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a face that was both handsome and dangerous. He sat his horse with an easy confidence, a natural leader surveying his domain. He dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He walked slowly towards Sarah, his gaze unwavering. "Well now," he said, his voice a low drawl that sent shivers down her spine. "What do we have here?" "A little lamb all alone in the wilderness." Sarah met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "This is my farm," she said, her voice steady. "You're trespassing." Jake chuckled, a sound that held no humor. "Trespassing? I wouldn't call it that. I'd say we're just collecting what's owed." He gestured to his men, who began to fan out, their eyes scanning the property. "We need supplies. Food, water, horses, anything of value." "I don't have much," Sarah said, her mind racing. "The drought has been hard. We barely have enough for ourselves." Jake stopped in front of her, his eyes narrowing. "Don't play coy with me, little lamb. I know you have stores hidden away." "Where are they?" Sarah stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. I told you I don't have anything to give you. She braced herself, knowing what was coming next. This was just the beginning. Ku's eyes glinted with a cold amusement. You're a stubborn one. I'll give you that, he said, taking a step closer. But stubbornness doesn't fill empty bellies. He ran a finger along the handle of his pistol, the gesture a subtle but unmistakable threat. My men are hungry, and they're not known for their patience. They get restless when they don't eat. One of Jake's men, a hulking figure with a scarred face, stepped forward. Boss, let's just tear the place apart. She's hiding something. Jake held up a hand, silencing him. Easy, Silas. We don't want to make a mess unless we have to. He turned back to Sarah, his gaze intense. I'm not a cruel man, Sarah. I don't enjoy causing unnecessary pain, but I will do what I have to do to provide for my men. He paused, letting his words sink in. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. Where are the supplies? Sarah's mind raced. She knew she couldn't hold out much longer. They would search the farm, and they would find the small stash of food she had carefully saved for the winter. And if they found it, they would take everything, leaving her and her children with nothing. She looked into Jake's eyes, searching for any sign of compassion, any flicker of humanity. But all she saw was a cold, calculating gaze. He was a predator, and she was his prey. Suddenly, Jake's expression changed, softening slightly. He noticed the fear in Sarah's eyes, the desperation etched on her face. He looked around at the dilapidated farm, the parched fields, the simple life she was trying to build. For a fleeting moment, he saw a reflection of his own hardscrabble past, the poverty and desperation that had led him down this path. He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. All right, Sarah, he said, his voice softer now. I'm going to make you an offer. A deal, you might say. Sarah's heart leaped with a flicker of hope. What kind of deal? Jake hesitated, his eyes clouding over again. He knew what he was about to suggest was wrong, but he saw no other way. The deal is this, he said, his voice low and gravelly. I'll leave your farm untouched. I'll tell my men to move on, to find their supplies elsewhere. In exchange, he paused, his gaze locking with hers. You spend the night with me. Sarah gasped, her face paling. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was a nightmare come to life. Spend the night with him? The thought was repulsive, unbearable. But then she looked at the root cellar, at the image of her children huddled together in the darkness, and she knew she had no choice. And if I refuse? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jake's eyes hardened. Then I can't guarantee the safety of your little ones. He smirked coldly. The choice is yours. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Spend the night with Jake. The thought churned her stomach, filled her with a deep sense of revulsion. It was a violation, an assault on her very being. But the image of Billy and Lily, their innocent faces, their trusting eyes, flashed before her. She would do anything to protect them. Anything. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. She looked at Jake, his face impassive, his eyes cold and unwavering. He was waiting for her answer, knowing that he held all the cards. Give me a moment, she whispered, her voice trembling. Jake nodded curtly. Take your time, but don't take too long. My men are getting restless. He turned and walked a few paces away, giving her a semblance of privacy. Sarah closed her eyes, her mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. It was a nightmare, a cruel joke. She thought of Thomas, her beloved husband, the man who had cherished her, who had treated her with respect and love. What would he think of her now? She opened her eyes and looked towards the root cellar, her heart aching. She imagined Billy and Lily, huddled together in the darkness, scared and confused. They were her world, her reason for living. She couldn't let anything happen to them. A wave of determination washed over her, stealing her resolve. She wouldn't let Jake win. She wouldn't let him break her spirit. She would do what she had to do to protect her children, even if it meant sacrificing herself. She turned back to Jake, her chin lifted, her eyes filled with a newfound strength. All right, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I'll do it. Jake turned back, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. He hadn't expected her to agree so readily. Perhaps he had underestimated her. "Good," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Then it's settled. Tell your men to wait outside," Sarah added, trying to retain some semblance of control. "I'll meet you inside in an hour." Jake hesitated, then nodded. He gestured to his men, and they began to move away from the farmhouse, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Sarah watched them go, her heart pounding in her chest. She had bought her children time. Now, she had to prepare herself for what was to come. She walked towards the farmhouse, her steps heavy, her soul aching. She was about to make a deal with the devil, all for the love of her children. Inside the farmhouse, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner was deafening. Each tick was a countdown, a reminder of the inevitable. Sarah leaned against the closed door, her body trembling. The shame was a heavy weight crushing her. How could she do this? How could she betray her own values, her own sense of self-worth? She walked to the small, cracked mirror hanging on the wall and looked at her reflection. The woman staring back was a stranger, her eyes wide with fear, her face pale and drawn. Was this what she had become? A bargaining chip, a sacrifice? She sank to her knees, burying her face in her hands. The tears flowed freely now, a torrent of grief and despair. She felt dirty, tainted, as if she could never wash away the stain of what she was about to do. But then she remembered her children. She pictured Billy's bright smile, Lily's gentle touch. She thought of their laughter, their hopes, their dreams. They were innocent, vulnerable, and they depended on her. She was their protector, their provider, their everything. And in that moment, the shame began to recede, replaced by a fierce, unwavering determination. She wouldn't let this break her. She wouldn't let it define her. She would do what she had to do, and she would survive. For them. She stood up, her legs shaky but her resolve firm. She splashed water on her face, tried to wash away the tears and the fear. She ran a brush through her tangled hair, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy. She walked to the root cellar door and opened it, peering into the darkness. "Billy? Lily?" she whispered. Two small figures emerged from the shadows, their faces streaked with tears. They ran to her, clinging to her legs. "Mama, are they gone?" Billy asked, his voice trembling. Sarah knelt down and hugged them tightly. "Not yet," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "But they will be soon. Everything will be all right." She knew it was a lie, but she had to give them hope. She had to give herself hope. She led them back into the farmhouse, holding them close. She knew that after tonight, everything would be different. She would never be the same, but she would survive. She would endure, and she would make sure that her children were safe, no matter the cost. Her internal battle raged, but one thing was certain. Her children's safety was paramount, eclipsing all else. She would carry this burden, this shame, for them. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Sarah tucked Billy and Lily into their beds, telling them stories of brave knights and magical fairies, trying to distract them from the fear that hung heavy in the air. She kissed them good night, holding them a moment longer than usual, imprinting their faces in her memory. Then, with a deep breath, she walked to the door and opened it. Jake stood there, his silhouette framed against the fading light. His expression was unreadable. He stepped inside, his presence filling the small room. He closed the door behind him, the sound echoing in the silence. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Jake didn't speak. He simply looked at her, his eyes scanning her face, her body. It was as if he was trying to understand her, to see what lay beneath the surface. He walked towards her, his movements slow and deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze intense. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. She felt numb, detached from her body. It was as if she was watching this happen to someone else. Jake reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers brushing against her skin. It was an unexpected gesture, a moment of tenderness that surprised her. His touch wasn't rough or demanding, but strangely gentle. "I don't want to hurt you, Sarah," he said, his voice almost a whisper. I just want to survive. Sarah looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of sincerity. And for the first time, she saw a flicker of something other than coldness and calculation. She saw a hint of vulnerability, a glimmer of pain. What happened next was not what she expected. Jake didn't force himself on her. He didn't treat her like an object. Instead, he was almost gentle. There was a quiet understanding, a shared desperation. He seemed burdened, weary. The following section is intentionally vague and focuses on the emotional aspect. It avoids explicit details. The night was long and difficult. There were tears, both hers and his. There were moments of shared silence, moments of unexpected connection, and there was a profound sense of loss, a recognition of the sacrifices they were both making. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Sarah felt exhausted, drained. But she also felt something else, a strange sense of understanding. She had seen a different side of Jake, a side that was hidden beneath the hardened exterior. Jake was gone when she woke, leaving only the lingering scent of his presence and the heavy weight of what had transpired. But he had kept his word. The farm was untouched. Her children were safe. And for now, that was all that mattered. The sun rose on a new day, but Sarah knew that nothing would ever be the same. The act was over, but the consequences had just begun. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and emotional turmoil. Sarah tried to return to her normal routine, tending to the farm and caring for her children, but the memory of that night haunted her every waking moment. Word spread quickly through Harmony Gulch. Silas, one of Jake's men, couldn't keep his mouth shut. He bragged about what had happened, twisting the story to make Sarah seem like a willing participant. The whispers started, the judgmental glances, the averted eyes. Some of the townsfolk, particularly the women, ostracized her, whispering behind their backs and shunning her at the general store. They saw her as tainted, a woman who had slept with the enemy. How could she? Martha, the baker's wife, said to a group of women gathered outside the church. Sleeping with a raider? It's disgusting. Others were more sympathetic. Old man Hemlock, who had lost his own wife years ago, understood the desperation of a parent trying to protect their children. He offered Sarah a kind word and a helping hand, reminding her that she wasn't alone. "You did what you had to do, Sarah," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "Don't let anyone tell you different. You're a good woman and a strong one." Doc Evans, the town doctor, also offered his support. He knew Sarah was struggling, and he made sure to check in on her and her children, offering the medical care and a listening ear. "People are quick to judge, Sarah," he said, "but they don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes. Don't let their opinions define you." Despite the support of some, the ostracism stung. Sarah felt like an outsider in her own community, a pariah shunned by those she had once considered friends. She tried to ignore the whispers and the glares, but it was hard. The shame lingered, a constant reminder of her sacrifice. She found solace in her children, in their unconditional love and unwavering trust. They didn't care what the townsfolk said. They only knew that their mother had protected them, had kept them safe. One evening, as Sarah was mending a torn dress, Lily looked up at her with her big, innocent eyes. "Mama," she said, "are you sad?" Sarah smiled gently and kissed Lily's forehead. "I'm all right, sweetheart," she said, "just a little tired." But Lily knew better. She wrapped her arms around Sarah's neck and whispered, "I love you, Mama. You're the best mama in the whole world." Sarah hugged her children tightly, her heart overflowing with love. They were her strength, her reason for enduring. And she knew that as long as she had them, she could face anything. The community was divided, but Sarah's focus remained on her children, drawing strength from their love amidst the judgment and whispers. A week later, Sarah was tending to her vegetable garden when she saw a lone rider approaching. Her heart leaped in her throat. It was Jake. He dismounted his horse, his expression unreadable. He didn't look like a ruthless raider, but more like a weary traveler. He wore simple clothes, and his eyes seemed softer, less guarded. "Sarah," he said, his voice low. Sarah stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice wary. I thought we had an understanding. We do, Jake said. I wanted to see if you were all right. Sarah scoffed. All right? After what you did? Jake sighed. I know I put you in a terrible position, Sarah, and I'm sorry. I truly am. Sarah didn't know what to say. She couldn't forgive him, not yet, but she couldn't deny that something had shifted between them that night. Jake looked around the farm, taking in the parched fields and the dilapidated fences. You know, he said, this place could use some work. Before Sarah could respond, Jake walked over to the broken fence and began to examine it. Needs new posts, he said, and some stronger wire. He spent the next few hours helping Sarah with chores. He fixed the fence, chopped wood, and even helped her water the garden. He worked in silence, his movements efficient and skilled. He seemed like a different man, a far cry from the ruthless raider who had terrorized her just weeks before. Billy and Lily watched Jake with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. They stayed close to Sarah, but they couldn't help but be drawn to his quiet strength and his gentle manner. Mama, Billy whispered, is it going to hurt us? Sarah shook her head. No, sweetheart, she said. I don't think so. As the sun began to set, Jake gathered his things. I should get going, he said, but I'll be back tomorrow, if you'll let me. Sarah hesitated. She didn't know what to make of Jake or his sudden change of heart, but she couldn't deny that she needed the help. And she couldn't deny that a part of her was curious about him, about the man beneath the raider. All right, she said. You can come back tomorrow. Jake smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. Thank you, Sarah, he said. I won't let you down. He rode away, leaving Sarah standing in the twilight, wondering what the future held. His return to help, defying his raider image, sparks curiosity and cautious acceptance from Sarah, hinting at a possible shift in their dynamic. Ku returned the next day and the day after that. He worked tirelessly, repairing the barn roof, fixing the well, and plowing the fields. He didn't ask for anything in return, and he didn't speak of what had happened between them. Slowly, cautiously, Sarah began to let her guard down. She saw a different side of Jake, a side that was kind, compassionate, and hardworking. She learned about his past, about the poverty and hardship that had led him down the wrong path. He had been orphaned at a young age and forced to fend for himself on the streets. He joined the gang out of desperation, seeking food and shelter. She discovered they shared a similar love for the land and a deep desire to provide a better life for their families. They talked about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Sarah told him about Thomas, her late husband, and the life they had built together. Jake listened patiently, offering words of comfort and understanding. Billy and Lily also began to warm up to Jake. They saw him as a friend, a protector, someone who cared about them. They would follow him around the farm, asking him questions and helping him with his work. Jake, in turn, treated them with kindness and respect, teaching them how to ride horses and shoot rifles. One evening, as they were all sitting around the dinner table, sharing a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Lily looked at Sarah and said, Mama, can Jake stay with us forever? Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Jake, who was watching her with a hopeful expression. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that something special was happening between them. A bond was forming, a connection that transcended their past. We'll see, sweetheart, she said, smiling gently. We'll see. As the weeks passed, Sarah and Jake grew closer. They found comfort in each other's company, sharing their burdens and their joys. They were two broken souls, finding solace in the most unlikely of places. But their budding connection was not without its challenges. The townsfolk continued to whisper and judge, and the shadow of Jake's past still loomed large. Sarah knew that their relationship was unconventional, even scandalous. But she couldn't deny her feelings for Jake. She was falling in love with him, and she knew that he was falling in love with her. Through shared work and open conversations, Sarah and Jake start to understand each other, finding common ground and building a bond that defies their past and societal judgment. While Sarah and Jake's bond deepened, trouble was brewing on the horizon. Jake's gang, left to their own devices, grew increasingly restless. Silas, the hulking figure with the scarred face, saw Jake's transformation as a betrayal. He couldn't understand why Jake would choose a simple farm life over the thrill of raiding and the power of leading the gang. "He's gone soft," Silas sneered to the other gang members. "That woman has bewitched him. He's forgotten what we're all about." The others, fueled by greed and resentment, agreed. They missed Jake's leadership, his ruthlessness, and the easy money they had made under his command. They saw Sarah as a threat, a distraction that was keeping Jake from fulfilling his duties to the gang. "We need to do something about this," another gang member, a wiry man named Hank, said. "We need to remind Jake where his loyalties lie." Silas hatched a plan. They would undermine Jake's relationship with Sarah, showing him that she was nothing but a gold digger, a woman who was only after his money. They would also remind him of the power he held as the leader of the gang, tempting him with the promise of wealth and control. They started by spreading rumors about Sarah, exaggerating her past, and painting her as a woman of loose morals. They hoped to turn Jake against her, driving a wedge between them. When that didn't work, they decided to take more drastic measures. They began to terrorize the surrounding farms, stealing supplies and threatening violence, all in Jake's name. They hoped to force Jake to choose between Sarah and his gang, knowing that he couldn't protect her and the children if he remained loyal to them. One night, as Jake was returning to the farm after a long day of work, he was ambushed by Silas and the other gang members. They surrounded him, their faces grim and determined. "Jake," Silas said, his voice menacing, "it's time to come home. It's time to remember who you are." Jake looked at them, his heart heavy. He knew that his past was catching up to him, threatening to destroy everything he had built with Sarah. He was torn between his loyalty to his gang and his love for Sarah and her children. He knew he had a choice to make, a choice that would determine the fate of everyone involved. The gang's growing resentment and Silas's manipulative plotting threatened Jake's newfound life with Sarah, forcing him to confront his past and choose between loyalty and love. His heart was a battleground. He stood before his former gang, their faces hard and expectant, and felt the weight of his past pressing down on him. He had spent years with these men, sharing their hardships, their victories, and their loyalties. They were his brothers, his family, but he also knew that their way of life was wrong, that it caused pain and suffering to innocent people. He had seen the fear in Sarah's eyes, the desperation in the faces of the farmers they had robbed. He couldn't go back to that life, not after what he had experienced with Sarah and her children. He looked at Silas, his former second-in-command, and saw the resentment burning in his eyes. Silas couldn't understand Jake's transformation, his desire for a peaceful life. He saw it as weakness, a betrayal of everything they had stood for. "I can't do it, Silas," Jake said, his voice firm but filled with regret. "I can't go back to raiding. I'm done with that life." Silas sneered. "So, you're choosing her over us? Over your own brothers?" "It's not about choosing sides," Jake said. "It's about doing what's right. I can't continue to live a life of violence and destruction. I want something different. I want a family. I want a future." The other gang members exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of anger and disbelief. They couldn't understand Jake's change of heart. They saw him as a traitor, a deserter who had abandoned them for a woman. "You'll regret this, Jake," Silas said, his voice cold and menacing. "You'll regret turning your back on us." Jake knew that Silas's words were a threat. He knew that he had made an enemy of his former gang, and that they would stop at nothing to get him back. But he also knew that he had made the right decision. He couldn't sacrifice his newfound happiness, his love for Sarah and her children, for the sake of his past. He thought of Sarah, her gentle smile, her unwavering strength. He thought of Billy and Lily, their innocent laughter, their trusting eyes. They were his world, his reason for living. He would do anything to protect them, even if it meant facing the wrath of his former gang. He looked at Silas one last time, his eyes filled with determination. "I'm not afraid of you, Silas," he said. "I'm not afraid of any of you. I'm ready to face whatever comes my way." Jake's internal conflict reaches its peak as he definitively rejects his gang and chooses a future with Sarah and her children, knowing it makes him a target. True to their word, Silas and the gang didn't let Jake's rejection go unpunished. They knew that they couldn't simply kill him. That would be too easy. They wanted to make him suffer, to make him regret his decision. They decided to strike at the heart of what Jake held most dear, Sarah and her children. One dark night, while Jake was away in town trying to sell some of Sarah's crops, Silas and two other gang members snuck onto the farm. They broke into the farmhouse and terrorized Sarah, demanding to know where Jake was and threatening to harm her and the children if she didn't cooperate. "Where is he, you little witch?" Silas roared, grabbing Sarah by the arm. "Tell us where Jake is hiding, or you'll regret it." Sarah, though terrified, stood her ground. She refused to give them any information, knowing that it would only put Jake in more danger. "I don't know where he is," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. "And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you." Silas's eyes narrowed. He signaled to one of his men, who grabbed Billy and Lily and held them hostage. The children screamed, their faces pale with fear. "All right, Sarah," Silas said, his voice cold and menacing. "It looks like you're going to have to make a choice. Tell us where Jake is, or we'll start hurting your precious little children." Sarah's heart shattered. She couldn't bear the thought of her children being harmed. But she also knew that if she told Silas where Jake was, it would be a death sentence for him. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Don't hurt them. I'll do anything you want. Just leave my children alone." Silas smirked. "Anything, huh? All right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to write a letter to Jake, telling him to meet you at the old mill tomorrow night. You're going to tell him that you're in trouble and that you need his help. And if he doesn't show up, well, let's just say that your children will suffer the consequences." Sarah had no choice. She wrote the letter, her hand trembling with fear. Silas took the letter and warned her that if she tried to warn Jake or double-cross them in any way, he would make sure that she and her children paid the ultimate price. The gang's threat to Sarah and her children escalates the danger, forcing her to lure Jake into a trap under duress. When Jake received Sarah's letter, his heart sank. He recognized her handwriting, but the words felt stilted, unnatural. He knew something was wrong. He rode to the farm as fast as he could, his mind racing with fear. When he arrived, he found the farmhouse empty and Sarah nowhere to be seen. He saw Billy and Lily huddled together in the root cellar, their faces tear-streaked and terrified. "What happened?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. "Where's your mama?" Billy, his voice choked with sobs, told Jake everything. He told him about Silas and the gang, about their threats, and about the letter that Sarah had been forced to write. Jake's blood ran cold. He knew that Sarah was in danger, and that he was the only one who could save her. He had a choice to make. He could run, leaving Sarah and her children to face the wrath of his former gang, or he could stand and fight, risking his own life to protect the people he loved. He didn't hesitate. He knew what he had to do. He owed it to Sarah, to Billy, and to Lily. He owed it to himself. "Stay here," Jake instructed the children, his voice firm and determined. "Lock the door and don't open it for anyone, except me. I'm going to go get your mama, and I promise I'll bring her back safe." He armed himself with his pistol and his rifle, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that he was walking into a trap, but he didn't care. He was ready to face whatever came his way, as long as he could protect Sarah and her children. He rode to the old mill, his eyes scanning the shadows. He knew that Silas and the gang would be waiting for him, and he had to be prepared for anything. He dismounted his horse and approached the mill cautiously, his senses on high alert. He was ready to confront his past, to face his demons, and to redeem himself for the mistakes he had made. This was his chance to prove that he was a changed man, a man worthy of Sarah's love and trust. He embraces his chance at redemption by vowing to rescue Sarah and bravely heading to the old mill to confront his former gang, ready to risk everything. As Jake approached the old mill, he saw Silas and the gang waiting for him, their faces grim and determined. Sarah was tied to a post inside the mill, her eyes filled with fear. Well, Silas said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who decided to show up. I thought you had gone soft, Jake. I didn't think you had the guts to face us." "Let her go, Silas," Jake said, his voice low and menacing. "This has nothing to do with her." "Oh, But it does, Silas said, smirking. She's the reason you turned your back on us. She's the reason you became a traitor. She's the reason I became a better man, Jake retorted. And I'm not going to let you hurt her. Silas laughed. You think you can take us all on your own, Jake? You're outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Maybe, Jake said, his hand hovering over his pistol. But I'm not afraid to die to protect her. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The two men stared each other down, their eyes locked in a deadly gaze. Suddenly, Silas gave a signal, and the gang members opened fire. Jake dove for cover, bullets whizzing past his head. He returned fire, taking down two of the gang members with well-aimed shots. The gunfight raged on, the sound of gunfire echoing through the night. Jake fought bravely, but he was outnumbered. He knew that he couldn't hold out much longer. Just when things seemed hopeless, Sarah found her opportunity. She had been working at her ropes since Jake arrived, using a shard of glass she had found on the floor. She finally managed to free herself, and she grabbed a discarded rifle from the floor. She aimed carefully and fired, hitting Silas in the shoulder. He cried out in pain and stumbled backward, giving Jake the opportunity he needed. Jake charged forward, tackling Silas to the ground. The two men wrestled, each trying to gain the upper hand. Finally, Jake managed to overpower Silas, knocking him unconscious with a blow to the head. With Silas out of the picture, the remaining gang members quickly surrendered. The showdown ends with Jake defeating the gang, aided by Sarah's courage and resourcefulness in freeing herself and turning the tide of the fight. With the gang defeated, the authorities arrived to take them into custody. Jake knew that he would have to face the consequences of his past actions. He couldn't simply walk away and pretend that nothing had happened. He confessed to his crimes, accepting responsibility for the pain and suffering he had caused. The judge, recognizing Jake's remorse and his willingness to turn his life around, sentenced him to a short prison term. While Jake was in prison, Sarah visited him every week, bringing him news of the farm and the children. She told him about Billy's progress in school and Lily's growing love for animals. She assured him that they were all waiting for him and that they believed in him. Jake used his time in prison to reflect on his life and a plan for the future. He knew that he had a lot to prove, both to Sarah and to the community. He wanted to show them that he was a changed man, a man worthy of their trust and respect. When Jake was released from prison, he returned to the farm, a changed man. He was greeted with open arms by Sarah, Billy, and Lily. They were overjoyed to have him back, and they were eager to start their new life together. The townspeople, though still wary, began to see that Jake was truly remorseful for his past actions. He worked hard on the farm, helping Sarah to rebuild their lives. He also volunteered his time to help others in the community, repairing fences, building houses, and tending to the sick. Slowly but surely, Jake began to earn the trust and respect of the townspeople. He became a valued member of the community, a symbol of redemption and second chances. He faced the consequences of his past, serving his time and returning to Sarah's farm with a genuine desire to rebuild his life and earn the community's trust. Years passed, and the farm flourished under Sarah and Jake's combined efforts. The fields were lush and green, the barn was sturdy and well-maintained, and the farmhouse was filled with the warmth of love and laughter. Billy and Lily grew into strong, kind-hearted young adults. They were proud of their mother and of Jake, and they admired the strength and resilience they had shown in overcoming their past. Sarah and Jake were married in a small ceremony, surrounded by their family and friends. Even some of the townspeople who had once ostracized Sarah came to the wedding, offering their blessings and their apologies. They had built a life together, a life filled with love, forgiveness, and second chances. They had proven that even in the harsh and unforgiving Wild West, it was possible to find redemption and to build a better future. Jake never forgot his past, but he didn't let it define him. He used his experiences to help others, counseling troubled youth and advocating for justice and equality. He became a respected leader in the community, a symbol of hope for those who had lost their way. Sarah and Jake's love story was a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of the human spirit. They had overcome immense obstacles, but they had never given up on each other. They had found love in the most unlikely of places, and they had built a life together that was stronger and more meaningful than anything they could have ever imagined. As they sat on the porch of their farmhouse, watching the sunset over the rolling hills, Sarah leaned her head against Jake's shoulder. "I never thought I would find happiness again after Thomas died," she said. "But you showed me that it's possible to love again, even after you've been hurt." Jake wrapped his arm around her and kissed her forehead. "And you showed me that it's possible to change, even after you've made mistakes," he said. "You gave me a second chance, Sarah, and I'll never forget it." They sat in silence for a moment, content in each other's company. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was a beautiful sight, a reminder of the beauty and hope that could be found even in the darkest of times. Sarah and Jake, having triumphed over adversity, build a loving family and a prosperous life, proving the transformative power of forgiveness and second chances.